This is a video tour of the interior of Sermon Notes for Kids, along with some tips on how you can help your child use this book while sitting in the pew. Several years ago, my husband and I decided to have the children sit with us in the service, which was a new experience for all of us. And we got off to a pretty good start, though, because I had read a book by Robbie Castleman called Parenting in the Pew, got a lot of great helpful tips there on how to train the children to worship when they're sitting alongside us in the service. I also read a lot of blogs and articles online, so we got off to a very good start. But then I started to realize that they were having a hard time sitting through the entire sermon. It was long for them. They did great during the first half, but then they would start to lose attention. I would work hard with them. I would try to help engage them. But it seemed to me that they needed something that would give them some self-direction on listening and staying attentive. So began my creating a bunch of different note-taking activities for them to use. And now I have made them available to you in Sermon Notes for Kids. The Sermon Notes for Kids is mostly for kids ages 6 to 12. And there are 7 different activities in the book. And in general, they go from easiest to more difficult. So your younger children, ages 5, 6, and 7, will find the first couple forms the most helpful. And then your older children will find all of the forms to be useful. So the first one is Scripture Scribe. And with this one, your child will write down or copy the main text or key verse that the pastor is preaching from, and be sure to remind your child to use his best handwriting. And it can be very helpful for the younger child, especially if you allow your child to underline the verse in their Bible before copying, and that will just help them keep their place. The next one is Keyword Alphabet. And with this one, I don't know if you can see that there, with this one, they will listen for keywords that match as many letters of the alphabet as they can find. Now, I tell my children that they do need to listen for significant words, that not small ones, so that don't mean anything to the sermon. So if the word is something that they can tell me about and how it relates to the sermon, then write it down. If not, I don't want them writing it down. Sometimes near the end of the sermon, if they've done a great job listening and taking notes, I just tell them, all right, go ahead, just grab at straws, just try and find any word in order to fill up those last few words that you don't have something for. Now for the younger child, what I did with my 6-year-old was, when she was not yet reading very well at all, I would listen for the keywords for her, and then I would write them down on a scrap piece of paper on the bulletin, and she would then look at it, find the letter on the page where it belonged, and then she would copy it. It really did not take long before she was able to identify the keywords on her own, and then just simply needed help with the spelling. The next one is Keyword Search, and with this one you will need a little advanced preparation, because prior to the sermon you will need to have some keywords listed here for your child to listen for. And then throughout the sermon, as he hears the words, he places tally marks on the other side here for each time he hears the words. So with this one, probably the best suggestion I could make would be is if you are able to find out what passage your pastor will be preaching from or the title of his sermon, you can pretty easily pull out keywords that he'll most likely be mentioning throughout the sermon. Or you might even be able to get the help of your pastor, as I do mine. What my pastor asked me to do is to just email him on Thursday night a reminder, and then Friday morning he sends me a message with about a half a dozen keywords in it for that coming Sunday sermon. So you might be able to get the help of your pastor. Just check with them and see. The next one is Keyword Hangman. Now this one is not for note-taking. This is more something that I use with my children near the end of a sermon, especially if they're getting a little antsy or are starting to have a hard time listening. They're getting tired of taking notes with one of the other forms. I'll use this just to help them out near the end. But what I will do is I will mark out the spaces for a keyword phrase. I like to do a phrase because it helps the hangman last a little longer. But you can play this without even saying a word. So have your child circle the letter of his guess. Then you put a slash mark through it and place that letter either in the space where it belongs in the phrase or up here in the hangman. What I like to do is to be a bit mysterious as to what I'm drawing up here. Sometimes I will do a 5-pointed star. Other times I will start to draw the outline of a house. And usually my children will guess the phrase before I ever finish the picture up here. And of course then they're dying to know what it was I was starting to draw up there. So have a little bit of fun with that. After they guess the keyword phrase, I then ask my child to, down at the bottom, write down a sentence or two telling something about that keyword or phrase and what it meant to the sermon to give me more information. The next one is Word Illustrator. And with this one, your child just simply illustrates or draws out the sermon. This is one of my favorites. Now, if your pastor is preaching from a passage in the Bible that is a narrative, well, then this is quite easy to do. If he is not, then it is still possible to illustrate. It just requires some more thinking and creativity to figure out how to draw that concept. But if it is something like that, you'll be amazed at how much it can reinforce the sermon and really cement it in your mind if you do it with the illustrator. The next one is sermon outline. I don't know if you can see that. My lighting's not good, I know. But with this one, this is the most difficult, but most pastors have between 3 and 5 main points to their sermon, and your child will listen for those main points and write them here. Now, some pastors, it's very easy to identify their outline. In others, it's not so much. But with practice, your child will get better at that one. And then the last note-taking activity for the sermon is called sermon notes. And with this one, half the pages are lined. The other half of the note-taking pages are unlined. These your child can use to take notes however he would like. They can also come in handy if your child has used up one of his favorite note-taking activities. He can use these for more, like the unlined pages he can use for more illustrating or for Hangman, and the lined pages can be for more Scripture Scribe or for keyword alphabet. Or maybe you and your child will come up with a whole new method for taking notes. I had one reader send in a great idea that we use all the time. We use this on the unlined pages of the sermon notes section. But I begin by writing a word down the middle, either the pastor's name or the book of the Bible he's preaching from, or a keyword that I hear right at the very beginning of the sermon. And then from there we play Scrabble. We listen for keywords and we try to build those keywords off of the main word I wrote down the middle of the page. So that's a very fun one too. Sometimes you'll find that if your child is starting to have a hard time listening and it's getting near the end of the sermon, he's been taking notes, it can really help to break things up by allowing your child to use a second note-taking activity. Maybe if he's been using the sermon outline, near the end, just have him stop with that one and jump ahead to either the Hangman, as I mentioned, or to begin using Scripture Scribe or keyword alphabet. It's not unusual that I have my children using more than one note-taking activity during a sermon. The last few sections are just bonus sections. This one here is called Missionary Moments. If your church has missionaries that come and occasionally make presentations, this is a great form for your child to be able to answer the questions and fill out. It will help your child discover the uniqueness of each missionary. Another bonus section is for prayer meeting. So whether your child sits in the adult prayer meeting or attends a children's prayer meeting, there is a section just for that. And then I also have in the back a communion guide. So if your child is sitting with you during communion, whether he participates or not, the purpose of communion is to be remembering what Christ did for us on the cross. So this is a guide on helping your child direct his thoughts and remember what Christ did, rather than being their mind drifting off and thinking about other things. There's also next to that guide is a page of lines that you can write your own things that you would like your child to be listening or to be thinking about during the communion. Then I have one last little surprise tucked in the back of the book, and this is called the Guest Speaker Log. And with this one, every time your child sits under the preaching of a different pastor or a guest speaker, afterwards they can go up to that guest speaker and ask them to sign their name and write their favorite scripture reference. And if your child is really brave, you could have him maybe even show that guest speaker the notes he took during his sermon. Well, I hope you will benefit from Sermon Notes for Kids, and I would love to hear from you.